projection.
Welcome to Taking It Down, the podcast where we genially unpack TV and film for progressive, busy Alabama folk. This podcast is produced by the site, thealabamantake.com, where you can find more writings and several more podcasts. I'm one of the hosts of Taking It Down. My name's Blaine Duncan. It's often I find myself trying to determine why I like what I like and why I dislike what I dislike. I put my English teacher's mind to work to contemplate how films, TV, books, and music are put together. And I was once a kid who grew up in front of a television set and was just thrilled to the bones to get to the movie theater for entertainment. My ideas aren't the only viewpoints for the podcast. With me almost every week is Adam Morrow, who is an erudite musician with a penchant for literature, Donovan Runwald, a media specialist with encyclopedic knowledge on film and more, and Natalie Morrow, who would be the first person to ask about fantasy, sci-fi, comics, trashy reality TV, and Beyonce. From our podcast, you'll get the TV and film analysis you want right in your podcast feed every Tuesday. You don't have to search for anything else. We'll cover the obvious and the obscure. For this week's show, Taking It Down, we are going to talk about... What are we talking about? We're going to do some Andor coverage. We're talking House of the Dragon. Mainly those two things. We'll do The Patient on the back end because I think that's worth discussion. We'll save it for the end. For those watching The Patient on Hulu, stick with us. Use the timestamps. It's autumn in the air. We're going to start with some autumn discussion. Here's my only co-host today. There's only one of us as far as co-hosts are concerned. It's me and it's one other guy. Let me introduce him as the 8th best quarterback in New England. It's Donovan Runwald.
Great to be here, Blaine.
With his sonorous NPR voice, the 8th best quarterback, maybe 9th best quarterback in New England area.
You know, I believe UConn prevented a total shutout against NC State. I was waiting in the wings the whole time for them to call me. You know, I was suited up.
We should really make, besides Alabama talk, of course, which we often do, Alabama football talk, and, we dog Auburn a lot because we're all Alabama fans. But besides that, we really have sort of adopted UConn as our mascot team. When they finally get a win, it's going to be like a party at this podcast.
Hey, it's within living memory that they beat UMass, the other worst program on planet Earth.
Those two programs. I talked about it being autumn, though. And we talked off air about it being autumn. I put this out on the Alabama Take social media, all social media, which you can follow. That's a little plug there. Autumn songs, fall songs. What do you think of when you think fall? Because to me, I can quickly relate music to most situations, especially seasons, especially the autumn and the winter season. So what do you have for autumn? And we may have done this last year.
I think I said this last year, and it's funny because it's not really, if you listen to the words, it's not really an autumn song, it's really an end of summer song, but it just seems so perfect for it, which is September's Not So Far Away by the Field Mice. The chorus being September's Not So Far Away, so it's really like late August, but it just feels like such a fall song. When it gets cooler,
yeah,
we're here towards the end of September, it still feels like September's not so far away.
No, I remember that band name. I remember you talking about that band name specifically. So and maybe I looked it up last year. Again, we may have done this last year. If we did, we didn't have as much audience participation. Here, I'm going to go through the list of responses we got. Some obvious, some not. Stephanie Green, When September Ends by Green Day.
Sure.
I mean, that's in that wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Dana Fennell gave 2, Time of the Season by the Zombies.
Oh, interesting.
I like that, don't you? That's a good one.
I wouldn't have thought of that for fall.
What, summer?
Yeah.
But you know what? I listened to it the other day and I thought, no, it could fit both.
No, I like that answer. That's a good one.
That was a really good answer, but she gives an even better one. There is a Light That Never Goes Out by the Smiths.
I was trying to think of... When you asked this question, I was like, I feel like the Smiths in general, but I can't tell you which song specifically I would take it. So I think There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that I've been prompted by that answer, I'd say Half a Person is a really good fall song too.
There we go. Yeah, I'm with you. And I think I replied to Dana and said any Smiths, any track.
Yeah, that's a really good answer.
Scott Adamson wrote September by Earth, Wind & Fire. A lot of people go to that one immediately. I've noticed. Not my favorite song, but
That one, it talks about September, but it doesn't really feel like a fall song to me. There's something too upbeat almost about it.
yeah, to me, you can be upbeat and still be a fall song. It's more about the vibe it creates, and that is so hard to pin down what's creating that. His other
Yeah.
response was Harvest Moon by Neil Young, and
Oh, that's a good one.
there you go. My goodness, you can do the chef's kiss there. Kristen Bolden wrote Wolves by Josh Ritter, and she says that the whole album really would be good.
Now, that's one I'm not familiar with.
Okay, I had to look that one up. It's in that, it gives the vibe. It's got the vibe.
Okay.
And I immediately added it to my personal fall playlist. Some of this is very selfish by me where I just do it for my own
You're always
playlist.
just looking for songs to poach.
Yes. Let's see. The Alabama Takes own writer, Jeremy Satcher, said Words Between the Lines of Age by Neil Young. It's from Harvest album, and I'd say a lot of that album.
Yeah, that album fits pretty well in the fall. A lot of Neil Young kind of fits in that fall vibe.
Mm-hmm. He's got a lot of his stuff away from Crazy Horse.
Yeah. Even
Yeah.
some of the stuff with Crazy Horse. Like, I think of Down by the River. That feels like a fall song to me. I don't
Mhm.
know why. It just has that.
That's exactly one of those things where it's more to do with the vibe it creates, and certain songs can be seasonal for someone else and not be a seasonal
Yeah.
song for another person.
I just think of that, like, crazy long guitar solo as the leaves are changing.
Yeah.
As you're driving, the leaves are changing.
Yeah, Adam is the best at this, and it's a shame he's not with us today.
He is.
He can pinpoint a seasonal song, particularly a autumnal song, and I'm going to talk for him, and I'm probably going to get his response a little wrong, but he would vote The Clientele, Jennifer and Julia.
At least, that's another good one. Almost anything by the Clientele has
He would say
kind
that.
of
Yeah.
melancholy.
Yeah, if you're not if you're not a Clientele fan, you should look those up and you'll hear what we're talking about. Daniel Chrysler is one of our final responses. He chimed in "Leaves That Are Green" by Simon and Garfunkel,
Okay.
and a lot of that album, another one of
A
those
lot.
where it's the whole album.
Yeah.
I immediately added that one to my.
That one's a good thought. That one's a good idea. It's funny. Simon and Garfunkel work for. I think of especially like when the two seasons that spark the song vibe the most to me are fall and spring.
Okay.
So I have songs that feel like spring, and Simon and Garfunkel have some songs that feel like spring and some that feel like fall, often on the same album, which is.
And they also do something where they encapsulate a city. I think New York.
Yeah.
If we want to go to a step even more specific, I think fall in New York. I haven't really thought spring in New York, but I'll keep my ear open for that. I'm going to suggest a few. I'm very curious, Donovan, if you'll agree.
See if I know them.
This is you'll know all
Okay.
mine. This one's a bit more obscure, but it's from Dinosaur Jr. It's a B-side, Turnip Farm.
Oh, I do know that one. I can see that being a fall song. It's kind of got that scuzzy fuzzy vibe.
Mm-hmm. It should have been on that album Where You Been, but he didn't include it. A lot of melancholy and the infinite sadness. The good tracks on there.
Interesting. I always think of melancholy. That one feels more like a summer record to me.
Really?
Probably because I'm probably super influenced by 1979 being on there, which feels like such a summer song.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously the big single from it.
And I'll tell you what happens with some of this. Sometimes my mind will connect it because of release date, and I bought that one day of release, and it was released in late October of 97 or 96.
Oh, sure. So when you're there, it's
there.
like you're in the environment and you're listening to it.
And I can tell you the exact situation where I was really soaking it in is me and a group of friends were going to a haunted house. Now,
that's a fall activity.
Is there anything more fall than that? And I listened to a lot of melancholy then, but in some cases, and maybe what you're getting at is it will take a while before the band releases it as a single, or it'll take a while before that album gets its momentum, and like everybody's listening to it in spring, even though it was released 6 months earlier.
And I think part of this is me having grown up hearing the single 1979, and that always just felt divorced from the rest of the album. Mm-hmm. And that for me just was, I don't know why, but I just identify it so strongly with summer. I think even the music video is kind of summery.
I remember that. Maybe they sat on that one and released it later. I don't remember the specifics of that particular release for a single, but they had a double album. They had so much that they could cull
Yeah.
from it. Wussy, Teenage Wasteland.
That was one that I was not familiar with until I think you mentioned it last year.
Okay.
And
that's Adam and my go-to for a fall song.
That one's a good one.
Bob Dylan's Duquesne Whistle.
Okay.
You can't beat that one. I don't. That's a release date kind of thing, but I still think it has a very fall feel to it. And he's got another one. It's a B-side. It's Can't Escape From You.
I don't think I know that one.
It's on one of his bootleg albums. One of the official, and it's really good. I got two more. Beat Happening, Indian Summer.
Yes.
You remember that one?
Absolutely. That is such a great fall song.
Did you know that, or have I talked about it before? This is so weird.
I had never heard it before, and then so UConn has a college radio station, and one of the DJs played it, and I just happened to be driving home from work.
Perfect.
And I was like, "Holy!" I'd never heard of Beat Happening. I had to look up that whole album, and that's clearly. I mean, the whole album is good. That's the standout track for me.
Oh yeah,
that's such a good autumn song, and God, it's got that melancholy to it that just works so perfectly.
It's got a certain wistfulness to it, and I love that. It's so funny. I love that you got that from college radio. Little backstory for anyone who cares. You, me, and Adam actually. Part of our friendship coalesced around music, and in part because of a college radio show you guys brought me into as a guest twice, I think. And that was so funny that college radio is where you got that. College radio is still alive, isn't it?
And especially, this is a digression, but kind of in the area that I was in, where I used to live. I don't live there anymore. I could tune into UConn's college radio station, and then there was a smaller college radio station from Eastern Connecticut State University that I could also tune into. And so sometimes it would be like, usually the Eastern would run like NPR, and then they would have in the afternoon slots for their students.
That's it, yes.
And so, you're spoiled for choice there.
Living in the very western part of Alabama, if you got on a high enough hill, you could pick up Mississippi State's college radio station.
Can you really?
Yes, and it was killer. It was so killer. And then, of course, we often traveled into Mississippi for beer or what have you. And, we would definitely pick it up there. And, my goodness, it was so good. Turned me on to so many good songs and things. The last one I got is very obscure for anyone listening, Cut Lip. Go listen to the whole album.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really, it is, right?
That's a good one. The whole album is good.
Yeah.
We'll just leave that there. Yeah, go listen to that album.
And I think it was made because of fall, I think.
I was going to say, a lot of said artist songs, the mastermind behind said artist songs, have that kind of fall feel to them. It's almost as if he really comes alive during the fall.
That's true. Let's get some TV. I think fall TV, we'll set that up.
Is fall TV a thing anymore?
Not really. It used to be when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too. But now it's like...
It's all the time.
It's all the time. It's 24/7.
And for those who are too young to know, fall TV, they would literally do this thing where NBC, ABC, CBS, and whatever other stations you had would release all their great television in late September. And if any of you are still fans of SNL, Saturday Night Live still runs on this schedule. Their first live broadcast will be October 5th or something like that. So whatever that day is, that Saturday.
Yeah, they haven't mixed it up too much since...
No.
Schedule-wise.
No, they haven't.
They started.
But speaking of mixing it up, they've got a lot of new cast members coming this fall. I'm always interested in what they do. I think me and Jeff Hansen are the last two guys who actually try to watch it live.
I almost never watch it live unless there's some really compelling reason. Usually it's like I'll hear what sketch was good the next day, and it's usually out on YouTube.
I think that's what everybody does now, which is fine. I've done that a lot too because of sleep habits, but I think Jeff and I are the last two guys who still text each other and be like, "Did you just watch blah blah blah?"
The last stalwarts.
We're old guys. Anyway, fall TV. We do have some fall big television happening, not because of fall, but because that's just when they're airing. Let's talk House of the Dragon, episode 5. We light the way. So
Do you like intrigue, Blaine?
Mm-hmm.
This episode was seemed more intrigue than anything else.
I thought it was the best episode of the season.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, I was the most engrossed I've been in this episode.
Okay. What was it about it that made it so engrossing? Was it just Rhaenyra has to marry the son of the sea snake?
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of his name. And she's trying to navigate her own. They have their little conversation where he's like, some people like roast duck and some people like chicken. And so they're both trying to kind of navigate their own way through this. Was that compelling to you, Rhaenyra's?
Not that, but when you put all these different characters in a room and you got tensions, all these different motivations in one big room, I think that's what got me. That and the badass dancing. Let's be honest, it's off the hook.
It was like, I felt like I was watching, if you've ever seen like an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice where a dance scene is always
yes.
Because it's so central. I was like, I feel like I'm watching an episode of Pride and Prejudice right now. Did you think that Sir Kristen kind of losing his mind, was that did that work for you, or was that kind of out of left field?
Some people talked online, I think, that they wanted more room for that to breathe. They might have needed another episode. I think not, because I was kind of okay with action ramping up, so that I was very forgiving of his unspiraling too quickly. I mean, hey, it
was definitely a good scene. I'm just not sure about if the target made sense. The target of his ire.
Well, that's true, and I think that's a very fair point. The target of his ire ended up being the suitor. Joffrey kind of, the poor guy who got beat up, I think his name was Joffrey, another Joffrey.
I think so.
So he represented something that the classic knighthood couldn't wrap his head around, and that's he was a lover and not a fighter. He was not a warrior, and he kind of represented all this stuff that his being trained as a devoted knight who had already broken his vows just couldn't get his head around. So if you look at it like that, you could stretch it into him that being a valid attack.
Yeah.
In his mind, in Sir Kristen's mind.
Right.
So I was forgiving of it, yeah.
We can give ourselves medals because I think Lord Strong is the new hand of the king, so we got that one right.
We did get that right.
Good for us. I think that one was pretty obvious, but I still feel like we can award ourselves a little pat on the back for figuring that out.
He was an obvious choice, I suppose.
Yeah. What did you make of his son, though, coming out and speaking so strongly against Rhaenyra, really, and it seems like kind of undercutting his father?
That flew by me. Tell me more about that, because I think that one happened so fast, or maybe when I watched it, I wasn't connecting him to being his son.
Larys Strong, who has he walks with he has a limp and he walks with the cane.
Oh, that's his son?
That's his son.
That dude looks like Mikey Day from SNL. I spent a whole 2 minutes trying to figure out if Mikey Day now worked on House of the Dragon. Maybe that's what happened. Yeah, he walks with a limp. He's sort of a dude around the court who's meddling in folks' business.
Yeah, he's in the. I saw someone call him he's really our first Game of Thrones schemer that we've had. Really old school Game of Thrones schemer that we've had. Someone wrote. I think it was on the AV Club.
He tells Alicent of the secret of the Plan B.
Of the tea. Which, lets Alicent know that Rhaenyra has lied to her. And
somehow, right. Uh-huh.
Is possibly... And I assumed that Alicent was kind of thinking, like, if she's lied to me about this, then maybe she is a threat to my children.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that one really was well cooked.
Yeah.
Daemon's wife was not what I thought she would be, and I think that was done on purpose. Every viewer probably had a very similar reaction.
Yes.
I'm the classic television viewer where if it's supposed to do that for the viewer, then it happens like that for me. She didn't do much to help with the impotence ideas about Daemon. She was a very pretty lady. For some reason, I was expecting a ugly lady, an older lady or something, but instead we get this very pretty. It seemed like she was cool to her cousin, and you're thinking, I think you're supposed to think, okay, so if Damon won't consummate with her, then something's really wrong with Damon.
And I think it's more with Damon. It's definitely supposed to be kind of more mentally than physically.
Oh yeah, I think so
Maybe
too.
maybe even one could say spiritually. Something's not quite right with Damon. I mean, and we see that, right? Like we know he's a killer,
Mm-hmm.
and this episode reinforced that with
He
his
kills his
wife's
wife.
unfortunate accident,
And what
quote
a great
unquote unfortunate accident.
And what a great directorial choice to cut away from him smashing her head, but yet we do get a head smashed later.
A head chopping off. What is it? A fish that's getting its head chopped off or something?
Oh yeah, there's that. But I mean, then you do actually get someone's face
later
pounded in.
Yeah.
Both of those, all of that worked. Only one smashed head per episode, I suppose.
I think that's all they're allowed. We got a smashed head in the very first episode during the tourney, if I remember correctly. So they have to dole it. They know what we're watching for. They have to dole it out piece by piece. Otherwise, we'll get oversaturated with smashed heads and we won't watch anymore.
What sort of gangrene does Viserys have?
Holy smokes. Is he going to make... I mean, every episode I say this, but is he going to make it to the next episode? Whoever's doing his makeup is great, because he's got something on his arm that looks absolutely repulsive.
Yeah. Do you watch the trailers for the next week?
I do.
Completely shocked he was in the trailer for the next week.
Especially after collapsing.
Yeah. How in the hell is this man making it X number of years ahead? Because we know that Millie Alcock is aged out of her role. A couple others have aged out of their roles. So it's obviously more than just a year or two. She is too old for her role, but yet Viserys, Paddy Constantine, still in the same role and alive and kicking. How?
You know, I kind of have really grown to like Paddy Constantine's portrayal of Viserys.
Me too.
So I'm glad that he's still around, because he has this combination of like how to describe it, like he's this mixture of want to be strength, like he wants to be strong and he wants to be a good king, and impotence almost. The Iron Throne is literally cutting him to pieces every time he sits on it. He can't quite seem to kill the stag in that earlier episode, and even with the war in the Stepstones, it seems like he kind of dithers, or he wants to be more on the side of peace.
Yeah, that's it. He wants to be a peacetime king, and he doesn't want, and even in peacetime, you have to make hard decisions, and he doesn't want the hard decisions. He wants everything to be smooth.
Yeah.
He wants the smooth decisions, like, will you marry this guy? And his daughter says, yeah, sure, why not? And then that's it, and then you move on. That's the sort of king he wants to be.
And I've just loved something about his facial expressions. Paddy Constantine.
He's good.
Has been. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything before this.
He was one of the possible suspects in The Outsider.
Okay, I did not watch The Outsider.
Oh, okay. Well, that was Adam and I talked about that one in depth whenever it was on 2 or 3 years ago on HBO.
Yeah.
It's a Stephen King rendition, but he played a pretty big role in the last half of that series, and he was good in it. And he was an American in it. So
okay,
the fact that he's a Brit, of course, probably blows a lot of people's minds. It does me every time I hear them.
How have we? Also, I keep trying to remember to bring this up. This is a total aside, but how have we never talked about the extremely X-rated tapestries in?
I was wondering which one of us was going to bring that up.
Who would finally break?
That, every good show...
And nobody seems to notice them, which is hilarious to me.
Right. Good shows make choices.
Yes.
Constantly. And to have that behind... is it Alicent that's behind?
It's Alicent,
the Queen?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a nod to something for you. Other choices I think have made revolved around Alicent is... There's something to be said about the colors she was wearing.
Yeah, and Laris kind of points it out for us. I think that's Laris who points it out.
Yes, he does. It is directly pointed out at the end, but her Targaryen colors shift into blue and then into green at the end, and the green is supposed to be significant to Old Town and her family. and her dad just got fired not too long ago for us as viewers.
Yeah.
Allison's pissed at Rihanna for not being honest, for taking the plan B and not telling her, for her dad getting fired. She's probably pissed at all this. A flash forward won't tamp down that sort of anger, but it is interesting for her to react now or have that moment. And I'm gonna sit on this until the wedding. But I guess that some of this information hasn't gotten to her until the day of the wedding. So
Yeah.
I suppose that does make sense.
And the players that she was trying to signal to weren't even physically there, right? If she's trying to send a signal to the king and to Rhaenyra,
Oh yeah,
they weren't actually there until
yeah.
the wedding feast, the wedding celebration starts.
I got to give my fuck you while you're all in the same room too.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. I really like the performance from Reese Ifans, I guess his name is. He plays Otto, her dad, when we're on the Allison track here. In that opening scene, he does a good job. A lot of my interpretation of film and movie have changed since I've become a dad. So I often look at this kind of stuff. He did this opening where he's getting fired or leaving, or he's telling Allison, "You gotta toughen up, stop." And he's kind of cruel, but then there's that end thing where he breaks and he's like, "I'm being cruel for you. I'm being cruel so you will be good. I'm being cruel because you're my daughter." He kind of breaks down. Does he end in tears there?
I don't know if he ends in tears, but he kind of. It seems like he gets emotional, right?
And of course, it's still questionable that he kind of offered up his daughter in a very pimp way in the first episode. Like, go console the king.
Yeah, he's
That's
definitely
still creepy.
Very calculating.
But then he does have this moment where he expresses love through anger, and I understood that in a way.
Yeah,
that a father may have. You definitely know where that's coming from, and because he plays it so well.
I agree. He did a good job with that, because that scene has to inform some of Allison's anger later on.
That's right,
and maybe even not just her anger, but maybe her fear too, because of what her father's warned her about. As he's angrily kind of like, Rhaenyra will have to kill your children.
Yeah,
they're too much of a threat to live. Yeah. And I agree with you. I thought he did a great job.
Now,
the acting, by and large, throughout this series has been very good.
Top notch. They knew what they were getting into, these actors, because Game of Thrones being so huge, so they went out and got probably as good as actors as they could have.
Yeah, I think they've really I would say lucked out. They've obviously done good casting with their younger actors too. With Millie, she's great. She's been great so far, and
so good.
And the woman who plays Alicent has also been very good, because she's asked to do a lot too in a more kind of subdued, caged in role. I think she's been good to watch, especially as the two have kind of grown estranged.
This is surprising to me. There's a vocal group out there that does not like this show. It's
really?
Yes, not critics, but fans.
I figured you meant fans, because I think the critical response has been fairly positive to this show.
Yeah, I don't see how the critical response couldn't be but positive so far, but there is a very vocal group of fans who do not like it. Now, they don't give good reasons.
I was going to say,
but they're out there.
Is this like the vocal groups of fans who don't like the Rings of Power because they had the audacity to cast people of color?
It's not quite that racist and sexist, but like I said, they're not giving very valid reasons. They just that it's boring, I think is what they've said, or they don't like the movement of time. It's not true to a book or something like that. Now, I think it honestly is probably true to the book it's covering, but I don't know.
If I'd read the book, or is it a book or a novella? I think it's maybe.
Good question.
I might feel differently, but it seems like the way Martin told it is like it's a chronicle, like a historical chronicle, and I feel like the sweep that they're trying to do, especially with the time jumping, they're trying to get that sweep of history across.
I think it's a cool thing that the book itself reads like a history text, supposedly. Now, listeners can come in and correct me all you want, or Natalie can when she comes back.
Yeah, that's Natalie's job.
That's Natalie's job. But it reads like a history text. That really opens up a lot. Like you can interpret certain things certain ways on the screen that way. And I think that's really cool.
That's my understanding.
It's like, here's the outline. Make sure you hit this point, and now go have fun.
That's my understanding of how they're they're using the source material.
Our conversations about this show has been fun. I've really enjoyed talking about this show. I know we're a week behind most people who watch it live on Sunday. We definitely are behind y'all. But if you listen, thanks for sticking with us. Let's do this. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll talk 3-episode debut from Andor, Star Wars series, and the most recent episode of The Patient. Yeah, we're going to cover Andor and The Patient, but we usually reserve time for She-Hulk. Did you haven't watched this week's episode?
I haven't watched this week's episode
yet. That's good.
It has not become, I've been watching it because we've been covering it, but and I feel bad because I love Tatiana Maslany, but it's not become appointment viewing like some other shows we cover have been.
I have a lot of opinions. No. I don't have a lot of opinions. I've got one clear opinion about the most recent episode of She-Hulk.
Okay.
But I won't say anything.
I think Natalie said it best last week when she said it's been very middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
If something's middle of the road, it's not a top priority for me when I'm figuring out my TV watching schedule, especially with the stuff we want to talk about on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. None of these are on our docket for this week, but this is what all I'm watching or making time for or about to make time for. Listen to this list. Fall TV. There's a show called Reboot, which looks maybe promising.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
It's about rebooting a show.
Oh, okay.
It's a comedy. The Handmaid's Tale, Reservation Dogs is wrapping up. Atlanta has begun again. She-Hulk, Welcome to Wrexham. I've noticed a ton of chatter online about the Netflix series Dahmer. I'm a sucker for the morbid. I really am, and I'm minding watching that, but I don't know if we'll talk about it much on here. My wife has been watching it. I don't know. It's Evan Peters as Dahmer, and, he's really good.
Okay.
And
is that
too morbid? I get it, but I can go with I'm quick to go to dark places, and I don't know, that almost sounds appealing. And then we have Mike Flanagan's returning with a show on Netflix in like a week, The Midnight Club.
Yeah, I'm hoping, based on how successful his Netflix stuff has been and how we had a lot of fun talking about. I'm trying to call it Black Mass, and it's not the one he did last year.
What was the name of that? Because I'm going to edit
Midnight
this
Mass?
Midnight Mass.
We had a lot of fun watching that and talking about it and covering it. I've said it a couple times before, but I feel like with Mike Flanagan, you're not necessarily going to get like the Shining level, like I'm inventing something new in horror. But what you're going to get is a really cool twist on something that you may have seen before, or some kind of innovative idea. I mean, for Midnight Mass, it was like, what if we did a vampire story in a world where nobody had ever heard of vampires?
Uh-huh.
Despite there were some clunky bits in that, but I think just as there were clunky bits in Hill House, but overall it worked really well, and I really enjoyed it, and it's getting to be that time of the year.
Uh-huh. He managed in that last one, he ended up in my top 10 that year, and he managed to merge horror and complex emotions really well. And hats off to him. I'm looking forward to this new one. I think it's based off a YA graphic novel or a YA novel, The Midnight Club. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Let's talk Andor, though. Speaking of Disney Plus and She-Hulk, Andor did make its 3-episode debut. Now, off the bat, Natalie nailed it, right? She said that it needed the bad news is it might need a 3-episode premiere.
Yes.
And it did.
I've seen, just from reviews that I've read, all kind of agreeing that it was a little slow to get going. And I think I would agree with that. And even sometimes it's like the scenes themselves were a little slow. Especially on the middle episode, it was kind of the middle of the first 3 that came out. I watched them all 3 all at once. And on the middle one, it was kind of hard to like figure out what exactly I was supposed to be caring about too much.
Exactly. That's well put.
And then by the time the 3rd episode came around, we had explosions. We've got a Skarsgård.
Skarsgård was needed desperately.
Yeah, the tempo kind of picked up a little bit. And I think some of the good stuff that the previous episodes were laying the groundwork for finally clicked. But yeah, there was There were some things that they could have, especially with how long it took the corporate security to get to whatever planet he's on, Phoenix, I think it's called. There was a whole unneeded, that could have started in episode 2, I think, and they could have cut up a bunch of fat there.
Yeah. In fact, it might not have been a bad idea. It might not have been a bad idea to had an hour debut and just packed all that into 1 hour.
That could have, and with a little bit tighter editing, because there were some moments. There were some moments in every episode where everything kind of clicked or it worked, or watching Cassian kind of wheel and deal his way through the world was kind of fun. Watching the world itself, kind of that they are leaning on more of the grim corporate hellscape / lived-in feel that I really like for Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So there's good stuff that happened in all the episodes, but maybe just with a little bit, if it had been a little tighter.
Episode 1 throws a lot at you and says keep up. It's also saying we're the adult show for Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Now is it slower pace that makes it adult, or is it vague motivations that makes it adult? Because I was trying to...
I think it's the intimation that people in Star Wars actually have sex that makes it adult.
Oh. Okay. I suppose. We know Cassian jumpstarts or joins the rebellion or helps it get off the ground, but right now, in the first 2 episodes especially, we don't know why he's doing anything besides to find his sister.
He seems kind of like maybe he's looking for a girl who is supposedly his sister, and we get that in the flashback, so it seems pretty likely that she is actually his sister.
Mm-hmm. Did you turn your captions on for the flashbacks and then find that there's no captions?
I had the captions on the whole time just because that's how the last person who, it was either me or Beth, watched Disney Plus, watched it with the captions on, and I thought, this is fine, I'll watch it with the captions on so I don't blow my ears out. And then, like all the captions for the flashbacks are like caption, people speaking in Kursin or whatever the name of the planet is.
I rewound the show and then turned the captions on to find that there weren't any. I think a lot of people did that. I got the sense that in order to make something more adult, speaking on that through line, you have to withhold action, or people have to be alone and look worried and sigh. And I guess that Star Wars thinks that's what adult is, or they did for a little bit.
Yeah, you couldn't have put it better. It's kind of like withholding it's going to be adult if we withhold the candy from you, right? Like the good stuff. If we make you wait for it.
I had a question for Adam. Sadly, he's not here, but I was going to ask him if the guy who does the hammering to signal when the shifts start, it seems, is he just somebody whose music career never took off? Because he's really into this hammering.
He's got his headphones on. Now, I guess they're supposed to protect his ears, but he seems like he could be listening to music the whole time. He's got his headphones on and everything. He's ready to go.
Did you find it interesting that they're so poor and so grounded? They're only miners, that they don't even have comms, communications, or a ship at all?
Yeah. I kind of like that.
You did?
Because it's like everybody in Star Wars seems to be able to afford a ship.
Uh-huh.
Even Cassian somehow gets his hand on a ship.
Turns out he borrowed one.
Yeah. From the junkyard, right? Like it's like a junkyard ship?
Maybe. Maybe?
No, I think I'm getting my ships mixed up, because the ship that he's in the junkyard is the one that we see in the flashback.
They do give the show room. I don't know if they should have. We talked about it being a little saggy. Got the incompetent leader who would have been conveyed differently than his poorly planned, drawn-out speech. I'm talking about the investigative guys for the mining. They get this young leader, and he gives a horrible speech to let the audience, the viewers at home, know this guy doesn't have it together. He's not a true leader. And usually that would have been shown much more quickly.
I did actually kind of enjoy that scene, mostly for... I thought it worked, and also, I guess this guy is a British character actor or whatever, but the man who's playing the sergeant, who's desperately trying to prop up this officer, clearly is not up to snuff. He was a lot. He was one of my favorite characters throughout the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. They bring in Fiona Shaw. She plays Marva, his adoptive Cassian Andor's adoptive mother.
She's a great actor, right? But she didn't have a ton to do besides to just kind of tell Andor to be careful, to have him have maybe kind of be a motivation of something that he's worried about, a reason that he needs to get off world because he wants to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't have a ton to do.
No, she didn't.
And that was sort of disappointing because she's obviously a very talented actor.
Hopefully, she will play a little bit of a role. They'll rope her back in. Maybe Cassian might end up going back and rescuing her and his friend, who's a girl but not his girlfriend.
What is their name? Bix, Burks, something like
Biggs.
that. Biggs. There's a lot. I find myself when I'm watching these shows like there's a lot of names being thrown at me at once, and they're all made up names.
Yeah.
So sometimes I can't remember what the heck we're talking about.
Yeah, and then
who the heck we're talking about.
And then they'll drop a Jason on you, and you're like, "What?"
Right, Luke.
Yeah, the episode 3 did end with the cycling through the faces. I knew instantly that was cheap, but it also did a good job of reminding me of why Andor's important and his ultimate fate is sad.
Yeah,
it was cheap, but it worked. I don't know if it was that cheap then. It worked on me.
If it worked on you, maybe it wasn't cheap.
So we'll see. I hope that it continues to be episode 3 and not episode 2.
I have to say, even though it was definitely saggy in episode 2, I was still kind of like, I want to see what's going to happen. The acting's good enough. The setting is interesting. What's been promised seems promising, especially with once they got Stellan Skarsgård's character into the mix, where it seems like he's recruiting for sort of the proto-rebellion.
And you're dying to see what that stick is he's carrying.
Yeah.
What does that thing do?
What is going on with that?
If they would have released this weekly, though, imagine what that would have been like.
Oh,
episode 1, and then a week later, episode 2, and then a week later, episode 3.
It would have been like watching the Book of Boba Fett.
Good point. It really would have. We would have been shitting all over it.
Yeah, especially at the end of episode 2, we would have been saying, "What is this show doing?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it going? Does it have any idea where it's going? What is it? Why is it taking so long?"
Mm-hmm. So cut out large swaths of episode 2 and just pack it all together into an hour-long episode. That's how we watched it anyway.
Yeah, essentially.
I think I watched it all. I watched it all in one day, all at 2 settings. Afternoon and night.
I was able to cram. You had earlier said that there are a lot of credits, and there were a lot of credits, so I was able to cram it in.
Yeah, you see
just in one sitting without too much difficulty.
You see a 30-minute show for Star Wars. That's a 20-minute show.
Yeah.
Speaking of a show that's quick, let's get our thoughts about The Patient in kind of quickly to wrap. We're going to talk about episode 5, Pasticcio. I thought about taking a break from this show, but it's hard not to talk about this one, so I'm trying to make room for it.
And this one, boy, did this one ever answer the, you were saying you felt like there wasn't enough menace yet from Sam, from Donald Gleason's character. Did this episode ever answer that complaint or observation?
This is the kind of thing that can make us look like idiots. Because the critics have the benefit of 5 or 6 or 8 episodes.
Yes.
And they can tell, they don't jump on an assertion, thanks to their screeners, that he's not as menacing. So they can see that a lot of this was building very slowly to lull viewers into a comfort level with Sam. Because I never thought during this episode until the end that he was going to harm the captive, but now I'm convinced he might very well harm Dr. Strauss.
Yeah.
So I was genuinely shocked.
It was. I think it was shocking because it just seemed like Strauss had been having. He went and saw his wife. He was trying to do, and you could see there was. He was doing the thing that he'd been doing very well, where it was all kind of bubbling under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
He was playing. As he's playing Kenny Chesney movie, and he's music, and he's.
It's so funny. Who on Kenny Chesney's team is signing off on this? Is it Kenny Chesney himself?
I hope so. He's trying to get on the message boards with other fans of No Shoes Nation, but
I guess so.
right at the end, you're trying to figure out, because they kind of introduce I can't remember his name, the young man who spoilers everyone, who ends up getting killed.
Yeah.
He says, "Bring me out there. Let's go down swinging." And so you kind of wonder if Strauss is trying to do that play or what he's trying to do. And then it all just goes so wrong. And I think Steve Carell really played that moment well, where he's begging for him to stop, and then he finally can't look at it.
Very real. Carell's reaction may be some of his best acting.
I think so.
It's up there.
He can really act when he puts his mind to it. And it's still very, you kind of think of Steve Carell, you think of maybe over the top type acting, but even his panic, there's something understated about it.
Yeah.
It's not big and showy and flashy. It feels more real, more grounded.
And it's the magic of movies and television, but how does Carell go from cleanly shaven in a flashback? What is that, CGI? How do they get that? In the flashback, he's a little younger, and and it's a pleasant flash.
It had to have been like CGI or something. The one where Ezra, his son, runs up to his mom, who's the cantor.
Yep. And they, it's a pleasant memory this time between Ezra and his mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a good job of recreating one where kind of sad that she's not there, of course. The ex-wife didn't seem to know that Sam's a murderer.
I think that she's completely in the dark about it.
Yeah.
She seemed nice, is all that there was to say about her.
Adopting a child in another continent and paying for that was something they both, I guess, agreed upon. And now that he's out of the picture, she continues to do this.
And she's got a second child that she's doing this for. Yeah, I would say that she does not know that he's a serial killer.
This show does small things good, of course. Most shows do that are good. It's just extra sad that Dr. Strauss has to wake up whenever Sam comes in and be prepared to do whatever.
Yeah, the way he switches on his little light
and crawls to the front of the bed,
crawls to the front, gets ready to sit up and pay attention.
Have we talked about the food in this show?
Not really. We've talked a little bit about how, because he's a restaurant inspector, he brings home lots of different kinds of food.
It's part of his career. His ex-wife, Mary, can't engage him in the Bangladesh food talk. The dude gets killed for talking about, or trying to talk about food. That's the name
about the pistachio that he came up with.
That's the name of the episode, too. Dr. Strauss, his problems with his family and his wife was about bringing food. They brought their own food to it, and then she serves the other grandkids ice cream right in front of the kids who can't have it. There's just a lot of food happening, which in a classic sense, and you can back me up on this, food is a bonding, a ritual.
Sam has even tried to use it like that, very explicitly, when he brings home something new and he's like, "Oh, you've never had whatever like this before." And I think you hit on something there, Blaine, where we've got food doing the opposite of that, where it's dividing. Like you said, he doesn't know the Bangladeshi dishes, so he can't keep talking with his ex-wife about them. Or, where the young man actually gets killed trying to describe, as he starts to try and describe how he came up with this dish at Dr. Strauss's prompting.
Where he and his family, it comes from his family, a very bonding way of talking about it. Like, my family came up with this, I love them, I'm a human, don't hurt me. And then that's stripped away violently. Okay, last thing we'll talk about. So Candace, that's Sam's mom, she does come down to stop him being violent. I think there's something to be said about her clapping at him like a dog. Stop! And then there's like 3 claps like you would with like a pet or an animal. And then she doesn't come down later, but she's awake.
She claps at him and says, "Go to your room."
That's it.
Which almost makes you wonder. And earlier she had said he was always just Sam. It's not that his father did this. So it kind of made me wonder if this was, calling back to earlier patterns of behavior that we haven't seen yet and maybe we'll never see.
And what role does she play in it? Because it seems it wants to nod that she's got some sort of agency in it.
Yeah, and then when she chooses or is too afraid to come down at the end, who knows what's happening, but
Dr.
Strauss is yelling for her, and we do see that she's awake in bed. She seems to be aware of what's going on, and this time she's not intervening.
That's going to play out in these last 5 episodes, and boy, is it going to! It's propulsive now for sure. If it wasn't already,
one of the things I've enjoyed about this show is it has basically every week left me wondering, where are they going to go from here?
Yeah.
Where could they possibly go from here?
Yep.
Half the fun is watching another 30 minutes to figure out what they're going to do next.
Yeah, that was a huge draw for Breaking Bad. Not so much the Americans, not that they worked on both of those shows, but not so much for the Americans. Sometimes you ended an episode of The Americans by thinking you knew where everything was set. And so the next episode was just going to be its own thing.
The Americans ran on, sometimes it seemed like, this is not quite right, but dramatic irony where everything was set up and the viewer knew things.
Yeah.
Kind of had an idea of how the picture was going to go, and so then the next episode would just be playing out what's already been set up, and you kind of watching the characters do what they were almost fated to do.
They're taking a different tack with this show.
Yes, they are.
In that sense. The last thing I'll mention, and we'll say goodbye to our audience, is I've seen a couple of this. I have to credit the message board people for this one. Sam's porn searches might allude to something in his background.
Yeah,
about the neighbor being a dad or something.
Stepson teaches my wife a lesson she deserved. Stepson, or I seduced my stepson, that kind of thing like that.
Yeah, something. It could be, or then again, it's just. It was very specific. They showed.
Could just be a red herring.
Could be, exactly. We'll see how that plays out. We might break from the patient depending on how much action happens, though sometimes it just warrants a discussion. That's all we have for this week's podcast, but we'll return next week. Follow us, our show. We have our own little subset of discussions at Taking It Down Pod on Instagram and Twitter. But of course, you can follow the Alabama Take on all social media to stay caught up on everything that's happening. Thank you for joining us. See you next week. Or actually, talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you next week.